taking a critical look at the gaming news of the week. This is Augmented Reality, presented by the Triple S League.
What's up, everybody? Hope you're all having a fantastic Wednesday. Welcome to the Augmented Reality Podcast, your source for news, leaks, and insights about games and the gaming industry. It's July 17th, 2019, the Wednesday edition of the show, as I already mentioned. My name is Asheninity, and I'm here, as always, with the Cybsidian. And how are you doing this week, sir?
DAI 19 asterisk TWL 20 asterisk ER 40 to 44 DETL WTATPS and transmission.
Yeah, I have no idea what any of that means. You're gonna
checkmate. That's what that means.
Oh, okay.
Checkmate indeed. All right. So for most of you who will not get that, I'm pretty sure that's going to be basically all of you. Check back with me in a little bit. So, anyways, that's some fun that we're having on the side. It has to do with other stuff, but yes, that basically sums it up. I'm doing pretty well for the long run. However, as far as like the recent moment here goes, it's like it's all just chaos. It's nothing but chaos and insanity and all kinds of crazy goodness, which is like, whew, and a pretty heavy news day too. So
yeah, all right. Well, I still have no idea how you're doing, but we'll just carry on with the show. So if you're listening live today, please do say hello in the live chat. Send us your questions and comments there as well. We'll read and respond to as many as we can throughout the podcast. And don't forget to slam that like button. It likes it rough, and it tells us and YouTube that you appreciate this content. If you're listening after the fact on the audio-only platforms, we're glad you're here as well. It does take us a day or two to get the podcast up to the audio platforms, so if you want to get the latest info sooner, we encourage you to hit the link in the description to subscribe to the Triple S League YouTube channel. So, there is... Notional wrote that all out. Okay, interesting. That entire code that you just said, Notional just wrote it in the chat. I thought you were going to bed. So yes, hi Notional, Time Being Out of Order 42, Jordan Knight, and Vladislav Prishepa. Oh, Neon Arcade's here as well. The live listeners are trickling in slower than normal. For some reason, when I set it up and scheduled the stream today, the alert didn't go out, and I didn't notice that till about 10 minutes before our normal live time, and so it didn't have the opportunity to get out there. Yeah, I don't know. Some weird glitch with YouTube. But anyway, we do have a ton to talk about today. It's going to be a packed show. We have a whole bunch of Cyberpunk 2077 things to talk about. There was a new interview with Alvin Liu from CD Projekt Red, and so we're going to be diving into a bunch of it. We're not going to go through the entire thing, but there is a ton of info in that, plus just some other articles that have been written, some new tidbits that we're going to discuss. Fallout 76, there's some more controversy surrounding what they're doing there with their Atomic Shop and some of the changes that have come in their new update patch 11, which just went live yesterday. So we're gonna go through that a little bit, just talking about the relevant things that have to do with Bethesda and some of the concerning directions that they're going in. Also, we're expecting some new info on Rick and Morty very soon. Rick and Morty Season 4 coming out. Cyb's got some stuff to talk about that. You're a big fan of that show. I still have to get into it because I need to find a place to actually watch it online. I suppose it's on one of those subscription services that I don't have access to. Maybe I should just sign up for a month and just binge watch it all because it's such a popular show and yeah, everyone seems to love it.
It's crazy.
Everyone seems to love it. Plus, if there's time at the end of today's broadcast, we're going to talk about the article that came out. It's about 5 days ago now. Came out last Friday. An absolutely bizarre article, and you've probably seen some commentators talking about this already. From VG247, entitled "Game Developers, It's Time to Stop Listening to the Fans." This is one of the...
So bizarre.
This is one of the dumbest pieces of video game journalism I've ever read. It basically contradicts itself multiple times during the course of the article and actually says that, BioWare changing the ending of Mass Effect 3 to please the fans was a bad thing. Did you know that? Oh, and did you know that Anthem failed because they did that? That's basically what this article claims. It's one of the stupidest things I've read in my entire life. So yeah, if there's time, we'll get into more details about that, and hopefully I won't go off on too much of a rampage about it, because it just infuriated me when I actually read this article. Also, tons of stuff in our content requests channel. A lot of you put in some messages there today of stuff you'd like to talk about. We're going to try to get to that as well. So like I said, very packed show. So thank you all for joining us for the live show, and also if you're listening after the fact. All right, let's knock this Fallout 76 stuff out of the way while we're waiting for more people to come in, because like as I said, it's taking a little while, a little more time than usual for the podcast to get out there for the live viewers. So Fallout 76, patch number 11 just went out yesterday, and there's some concerns. There are some concerns. I mean, not only did it bring in a bunch of old bugs again, and not fix a bunch of things that people have been asking for them to fix. I mean, it's been a fiasco. But we're just going to talk about one particular thing about it. One of the things that changed in a section entitled Gameplay Improvements for New Players is that the rewards, and this I'm reading word for word from the patch notes now, the rewards for many early game challenges have been reworked and now award items that will help a new player survive, such as aid, weapons, armor, etc., instead of atoms. Now, when I was playing Fallout 76, I bought a few things from the Atom Shop, only using the atoms that I had acquired during the early game. Because they gave you a bunch of atoms for free for doing various things. And, the rate at which you acquired them slowed down. But we have here a case where they're not just saying we're going to give you some items in addition to atoms. They're removing atoms as a reward for many of the early game things. All right, so they're making atoms harder to acquire. Of course, you can buy them for a price, but there are also other in-game ways to achieve them. I think that it's daily quests and weekly quests. That's what I read. But there's something else interesting in the Atom Shop. A new utility item has been added called a scrap kit. Scrap kits are new one-time use items that you can use to scrap all the junk you're currently carrying and immediately deliver the resulting components to your stash. They can be used anytime, anywhere, without needing to visit a workbench or your stash. You can unlock scrap kits in the Atomic Shop using the atoms you've purchased or those you've earned by completing in-game challenges. Upon purchasing scrap kits, you'll be able to select which of your characters receive them. If using a scrap kit would put your stash over its maximum storage space, you will receive a warning notification, etc. Alright, so, you can buy a scrap kit for 50 atoms in the store. You can buy a pack of 6 for 250 atoms, a pack of 15 for 500 atoms. This is very similar to the repair kits that were introduced in an earlier patch. Now, when the repair kits came out, they were heavily criticized because Bethesda had previously promised they weren't going to be adding any gameplay influencing items into the Atom Shop. It was going to be cosmetic stuff only. Now with the repair kits, they added in an item that basically can give you an advantage, albeit a small advantage, but an advantage in gameplay that you can purchase in the Atom Shop. Now they've got a second one, the scrap kit. And again, a fairly small advantage. It's basically a time saver. You don't have to go find your workbench or your stash box in order to scrap items and store items, your junk. And that is one of the big problems that was one of the most annoying things about playing Fallout 76 was all the junk you'd wind up carrying, because you need those scrapped materials to craft stuff. So now there are 2 of these items in the shop, and they've nerfed the ability to acquire atoms in the game. So, a lot of people have been commenting about this and saying this is not a good direction. And so this is just kind of further evidence of the bad direction that Bethesda's going with this. Making atoms, it's basically encouraging people to spend more money on in the Atom Shop for a game that you've already paid full AAA price for. Which, I don't know, I consider disgusting. And I know, Saib, you have your thoughts on it, but another thing about the scrap kits, there's no indication that they can be acquired through gameplay. Repair kits, not yet. I mean, but it's possible. I mean, it's only been out for a day, so we don't know for sure. But if we look at the repair kits, they can be acquired through gameplay, but there's only 2 ways to get them, according to the Fallout Wiki. One is to defeat a Scorch Beast Queen, and the other is it's a possible reward for completing an encrypted event. So, yes, you can beat them, you can collect them through normal gameplay, but it's very difficult and very rare. Now, we were talking about this earlier, Saib, you and I, and you said you consider this to be evidence that they are going to go free to play?
Oh yeah, this is like a total move to go free to play. One of the things you want to do is you want to take down a lot of your special currency that you get, kind of like the cash-based currency. You want to remove a big chunk of that in the early game. You want to keep it for mid and late game, but you don't want it to you don't want to flood the player with a ton of currency right off the bat. Because what this does is this creates a system where super casual players are rewarded for just building new accounts, which ends up flooding the system with a lot of useless, pointless data, which floods the naming system. There's a whole bunch of logistical reasons why you do this when you're doing a free-to-play game. You take down basically incentives to spam new accounts for new players. There are some games that do this on mobile where they kind of give you an incentive for building a new account, and there are some people that will build anywhere between 20 to 100 new accounts in the first couple of days to try and get a particular item, a particular drop, a particular bonus, a particular thing, and or just pile up this micro cash and then try to do various things with it. One of the biggest problems you would have with this is that because a lot of these items are tradable, that you can some of the stuff. So for example, some of the costumes that you could get in the cash shop are tradable. So you could get enough points, as I did playing the game early on. Within 24 hours, I had enough to buy one of the costumes. So I bought one of the costumes at no actual cash expense to me, and then I just turned around and I could give every person in my squad one of them. And I could just leave hundreds of them in hundreds of different places for random people to pick up. What they want to do is they want to avoid having that as a spammable thing, and creating these ghost accounts where they create a ghost account, they run through a bunch of preliminary stuff, and then they buy some stuff in the shop, and then they drop it on the ground, and their alts pick it up and then transfer it or sell it to somebody else. This is the process which you are removing the chance for players or for bots to be encouraged to create new accounts and to stick with longer accounts. For example, if I'm running a bot farm and I can get if I can spend 10 hours on an automated new account and get $10 worth of stuff that I then I get $10 worth of stuff that I make from that account. That is really, really good, because I can run 6-7 different versions or clients on a single computer at a time, and then I multiply that over by a server farm basically, and just automate the whole process, and you're making soon you're making hundreds of dollars a day, and you're just creating thousands of trash accounts. So when you change it so that you don't get anything in the first 10 hours, you start to get stuff after 20 hours, then my chance for making money drops significantly if I'm the one running a bot farm. So in this particular case, the removal of the atoms from the early game stuff, and it's not a removing, they're not just dropping them, they're changing them to items that are kind of like bound to you that you can use, special weapons, some armor, some other stuff that before was more or less RNG based. I remember going through the first like 10 hours and I didn't have a good or basically worthwhile left leg to wear. I think it was the left leg. It was one of the leg pieces. And I ran around for the first 20 hours without having a left leg piece. So what I suspect that they're doing is they're going to try and give you more pieces to kind of fill out what you need to like run around and encounter doing basic encounters, that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's what I would assume why they're doing this and why they're doing this in this particular way. And I have no problem against that. And I think people who are raising alarm bells about this are basically kind of freaking out over nothing really when it comes to that aspect.
Except
now,
that it's not a free-to-play game yet. And like if they were to make this change when it goes free-to-play to stop people from gaming the system, sure. But at this point, if they want to add additional rewards, like item rewards for people,
okay.
They don't have to remove the atoms. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, they do. Because if you remove the atoms right before it goes free to play, you're going to have a lot more people complaining than if you were to do it now. If you do it now, then nobody's complaining in 6 months when it goes free to play.
I think people would understand at that point that big challenge.
No.
Trust me. As if they're worried about people complaining at this point.
I have seen a lot. I have seen and worked with a lot of companies that go free to play, and this is a big issue when they do this shift and suddenly you're not getting the same rewards. People come in and start just absolutely getting, what was a good example? There's a couple of good examples, but I won't name too much because I shouldn't really name names. So no, this is something that has to happen now before they go free to play in like 6 months.
Well,
so
we clearly have a difference of opinion about this. I mean, I think you have a point on as far as okay, they have to do it if they're going to go free to play, but I mean, still it's very suspicious timing that they do this at the same time as they introduce a second game-altering item into their
which affects absolutely zero players playing this game right now. Like I gotta say this. You're really upset about people who get access to the first 5 hours of gameplay, getting atom rewards for that kind of stuff, when basically there's nobody new playing this game. It's just
that's not the point.
Their existing community.
The point is that they've added a second.
This only affects new. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm still talking about the atoms.
Oh, okay.
The removal of the atoms only affects people who have recently bought the game. Do you really think that's a big number of people?
No,
really?
I don't. But that's not the point I'm making. The point is, in combination, it looks like a big shift towards encouraging people to dump a little more money into that cash shop.
No. And this, well, I mean, now if I move on to the subject of the new item, yeah, it is basically paying for power, but it's for lazy people basically. Like I can't honestly. I can't think of why, and I can't give a good, I don't think this is as big of a deal as some people are making it out to be. Because
you could buy game-altering items in a AAA
really
game it's a small thing, but this is not game. You think they're going to stop with repair kits and scrap kits?
No, and I get that. Like, I get the point that people are upset about this because it means that there's more coming, right? And I agree with the more coming thing, and we should make noise about it because of that. I am very much against this concept of, well, it's basically because that this is a big thing. No, this is something that they're selling to people who basically spend way too much time in the game for whatever reason. Way too much time in the game. if you can't, if you don't have the time to walk the about a minute and a half to any of the places that you can junk your items, like there's seriously, like when I was deep into the game and we were playing it like pretty much nonstop, I was your pick a place on your map, and you're about a minute and a half to less than a minute away from a place where you can junk your items.
Sure,
And
but you start
I'm
doing that
quite
5,
serious
6,
about
7
that.
times an hour. That becomes a pain. So it becomes a
But-
grind, and they make it a grind, and then they sell you the tool to solve
30
the grind.
seconds.
That's the
Again, yes, I see where you're going with it, but the whole like 30 seconds thing, like again, this is only affecting a very small number of people who are literally spending way too much time in this game.
yeah, but that's not our. It's I mean, it's not our place to morally judge a person and say you're spending too much time in the game if you buy this. Like, the point is that they create the grind. I mean, it could be people that just don't have a ton of time as well that
you
they're
could
trying to
say-
prey on. Like, hold on a second. Like, it could be the people that I only have an hour to play this game, and I don't want to be spending a quarter of that just going back and forth between my stash.
But
Those
I
are the
just
people
said
they're
you're not
preying on as
spending a
well.
quarter. You're not spending a quarter time with that. That is absolutely not what you're doing, and it's just
Depends
it's just
what
a
you're
mechanic.
depends what you're doing. There were times when I felt like I was spending half the time just traveling around. I mean, depending on what I was doing.
But again, you're not cap level, and you don't when you're setting up yourself to like farm, right? And not to mention, like seriously, I've seen people playing this game at like top, they're level 500 or something like that right now. They have like their two, best in slot weapons, and then they've got their like basically their best in slot armor, and all they're doing is they're running a mini factory pumping out their weapons, ammunition, and body armor and stuff like that, repair stuff to farm the super high level stuff. They're not doing what you're suggesting. They're not running back and forth gathering, spending 5 to 6 hours gathering items from all corners of the map.
But
At
that's
that
not the
point-
type of player I'm talking about either.
At that point, once you hit this like upper levels, or if you're in a guild or if you're in a clan, you're not running back and forth between random stuff, picking up random stuff. You literally have a farm that generates this stuff per hour, and so again, this is more of a PvP thing, I think, than it is some kind of like specialized way to like cheat the system or whatever. So I'm really not I'm not happy with more items that affect gameplay in the store, which they promised they wouldn't do. I'm very upset about that. But as far as like the idea that this is like that they've created a super problem and that they're selling you the solution, that again, for only a handful of idiots that think this is useful.
Well, anyway,
basically.
I mean, we obviously have a difference of opinions somewhat on this, but anyway, that's what is going on with Fallout 76. We are going to move on to more interesting and fun things. Cyberpunk 2077, and I see that our live audience number has grown considerably. Hello, everybody. I'm glad you have joined us. The alert didn't go out for some reason when I scheduled the live stream today, so it went out late. Don't know what happened there. All I did was
I didn't get it out on Twitter until after we started. So.
Yeah. So anyway, lots to talk about in the world of Cyberpunk 2077. By the way, I love this joke that's going on in the chat right now. Do atoms matter? Not if
Not
they
really.
antimatter.
Oh, ha ha!
I love it. Okay, so
Oh, time being you funny Joe, you. Oh stop! It's so funny.
all right. So the world of Cyberpunk 2077 book is coming out. It's a big lore book, diving into. It's a companion book to Cyberpunk 2077. It's going to be releasing a week after the game comes out in April, presumably so that it doesn't give out any spoilers. But that's going to be an interesting thing to look forward to, and it's described as an extensive, lovingly designed exploration of the game's fictional near-future world. So that was cool. That was announced just recently. So that's another thing we can look forward to. Another thing that happened recently, actually, it didn't happen recently. We are still getting articles written about interviews that happened at E3 that just nobody's published yet. But anyway, so WCCFtech.com sat down with Alvin Liu, who is he is a UI designer and a spokesperson for CD Projekt Red, and this interview took place at E3, and there was a ton spoken about in this article. I'm not going to go through it all because a lot of it is ground we've covered before. There's questions about romance, there's questions about corporations, which we've been talking about for years, and talking about Johnny Silverhand. So we've talked all those things to death. Now there is a suggestion in here because there was a rumor that potentially Lady Gaga might appear in the game. Alvin seems to suggest that is not the case. So the interviewer asks, there were rumors about Lady Gaga, and his response is, she's pretty cyberpunk, so she could fit in, but no Lady Gaga. And then he goes on to talk about Keanu Reeves. So
because the first thing they're going to do is they're going to tell the truth about a major super guest on her level.
Yeah, well, it could be a mislead, but I mean, maybe, who knows? We just don't know at this point. At least not in any official capacity. I don't know if you know something that I don't, Cyb, but I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, some interesting things that we haven't really spoken out about a lot before also came out of this interview. And so I'm going to start with this question about things about some of the factions and then some of the different areas you'll be able to explore in Cyberpunk 2077. So the interviewer asks, beyond the corporations, you also have the gangs in Cyberpunk 2077. Are there any other factions in the game, though, beyond the corporations and gangs? And Alvin's response is, yes, we also have, obviously, the people just trying to live and stay alive in Night City. We also have what we call the nomads. Outside the city, we have people who just don't want to live in the city for whatever reason. Maybe they have some very strong family ties in their community, or maybe they hate the idea of being a corporate slave working for gangs, and they want to be strong and independent instead. Now we have talked about this, but this is relevant and interesting to me because one of the life paths you can choose in Cyberpunk 2077 is to be a nomad. And there's also a hint that the life path that you choose during character creation might actually affect the physical location where you start the game. So if you start as a nomad, you might actually start in the outskirts, like in the Badlands outside the city. The what do they call it? The Badlands?
Yeah, the Badlands.
Yeah, so they if we go back to a statement from Pavel Sasko, a quest designer, this is from back in June. He says, you can be one of the nomads as a player, and you can start there, being part of a family of nomads. So,
hence why when we were talking earlier today, this amongst other things, I'm like, this is new news? I'm pretty sure this is old news.
This isn't new news, but I'm pretty sure we haven't talked about it, at least not on this podcast. It may have come up on the community podcast.
Oh, maybe that's what it is. Yeah, no, the separated starts thing is that's a pretty that's kind of like a necessary thing.
I don't know that it would be absolutely necessary. I mean, it makes sense that your background would affect the gameplay going forward, and we know that your life path will absolutely affect how you can interact with the game going forward. Mateusz Tomaskevich, quest director for Cyberpunk 2077 at CD Projekt Red, he was in a video that was released on Twitter this week talking about it, and he talked about how if you start off your life as a street kid, you may be able to have an easier time talking to gangs, whereas if you start off as a corpo, corporate upbringing, you'll have more advantages with the corporate people. You'll know how to talk to them, that kind of a thing. So that's going to bring a really interesting dynamic into the game. But I mean, I I had kind of just assumed that regardless of what your background was, somehow you would start the game at the same spot, doing the same introductory quest. But that may not be the case. It may be that you start in a completely different location, which is interesting. So, yeah. You have any more to say about that before we move on?
Basically, it's a really popular system. It's very difficult to do, especially if you're making like longer series. And you definitely want to keep it under wraps. When they were working on Dragon Age 2 and 3, and they realized that if they were to replicate Origins, and they were to replicate Origins using the hero from the first game, that they were looking at an exploding number of alternate storylines going through. They were up to, what was it, like 1,400 by the second game, and like closing in on like 280 some odd thousand for the third game, which is why they discontinued using the original hero from the first game, because it was just too much. It was just too much complexity as far as like character background, choices, that kind of stuff, which is why I keep saying that the real point at which we will encounter this stuff in the future, and where games will split off and actually start offering us this kind of stuff, will require a very new AI to help assist with the creation of the stories. Mm-hmm. And that once that happens, we will have this sudden explosion of choices where, you're starting you're starting a game or something like that, and it's like some kind of cross between an MMO and a giant open world shooter slash. And I know some of you are cringing. MMO, no. I mean, like, this is next gen stuff. So like, everything's online. You're in a world with like, that literally has, you will not be able to explore the entire world in your lifetime. Okay, this is how this is going to roll. So you're in a world that you have not the capability or the possibility of exploring every single inch of every single level of every single location, because it would just take, millions of hours that you don't have, because the world is that big. And instead of having the same start that everybody else has, you have a customized start that is unique to you. And that by some kind of a quiz or a survey, or maybe a profile that a certain supercomputer keeps on you, the computer will basically fit you with a story line that you want, or that you would be surprised at. Not necessarily something that's on your list, but then suddenly something that you're surprised by. And it's going to start creating the story and telling you this thing that you're absolutely amazed by. And boom, you're there. And now you're in full bore. Like, so this kind of technology that was a really long way around it, but I promise you it's going to make sense. So this is why companies tend to steer away from this, like, specialized start. But in this particular case, it's going to be pretty easy, because your mission to take you to the point where you get the chip is going to be a pretty short jog. And you can create a whole variety of starts before that. And I cannot wait for modders to get their hands on this, because I cannot wait for you to have, like, hundreds and hundreds of other starts. There's one mod for Skyrim that is like Live Another Life, and you get to start everything from like, princess to person working at an inn to owning your own farm to, slave in a cage somewhere at the bottom of a vampire nest to like literally just anything and everything that you could possibly imagine. And we will get there with this right now, but as far as what the studio can actually produce, they're going to only be able to create like not one or two. They're only going to be able to create a very small number of starts, probably about 3, maybe 4. Mm-hmm. And that those will be reflective of what your kind of start is, and then you'll have a little bit of this and that and some story, and then you're gonna, end up, going to meet Jackie, and then this is where the train starts taking you. Really, the only like super linear part necessarily of the early game. It's like, here's this mission. This is gonna introduce you to the world, introduce you to the characters, and then suddenly the doors are gonna open. You're gonna be able to explore anything and everything that you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So
probably one start per life path, I'm guessing, right? Or perhaps
yeah, possibly two per life path. There's
maybe
possible.
there's another choice you can, like, they removed the choice of childhood hero, but
But that's because mostly that's been reworked into the
Right.
other portions of the story.
yeah,
So
exactly. But maybe there's another choice that slightly affects how you start off.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So there's going to be a limited number, obviously, of what they can do, especially if they want to keep everything coherent and have it affect the world in meaningful ways. There's only so many options. But Leonie Hart asks in the chat here, will the dialogue system have social skills? Depending what you mean by social skills, it's going to have you're going to get different options depending on choices you've made and depending on your background and different things that get implemented in your character creation. Is there going to be a social skill, like, in some games you have a speech skill, that kind of a thing? I don't recall off the top of my head if I've heard anything about that. Do you know, Cyb?
this is one of the things that has been in a state of flux. So I wouldn't. I'm not going to make any promises with that. But there will be certain speech paths that you won't be able to go down for particular reasons. Let's leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So getting back to this interview with Alvin Liu, though. So springboarding off that question about the gangs, and Alvin talked about the nomads. So the interview asks, does that mean we'll get to explore the outskirts of Night City too? And we've known for a while that this is true, but he gives us a little more detail about it. He says, absolutely, you'll be able to go out in the desert of California and view things like power plants, abandoned highways, and stuff like that. So you're not limited to just Night City. It's a really cool place to use our cars and drive them fast, as it's hard to go super fast in the city. We do have street racing, though. We know that from Lilia confirmed that for us when she was on the Cyberpunk 2077 community podcast, which, by the way, goes live every Sunday. It's Sunday afternoon if you're in North America. It's later in the evening if you're in Europe. But that's a collaboration we do with 3 other Cyberpunk channels, the Mad Queen Show, the Neon Arcade, and Last Known Meal. So definitely check that out. Rotates between those 4 channels. So anyway, that sounds really cool. So you can go off-roading in this nomad area, in this outskirts area, and just blaze around in your car, and there will be stuff to explore there. So it'll be like a Fallout style world outside of the city, sounds like. So that sounds really cool. So you'll have the big open area to explore, and then you'll also have the more densely populated and really packed in urban area inside the city. So, all right, did you have something to say? It sounded like you were gearing up to say something there.
No, it's looking good. It's looking good.
That sounds awesome. Okay, interviewer went on to ask, if you commit crimes, are the police coming after you? How does your outlaw system work? Alvin replies, the way that works is that they're basically up for hire. Basically, the laws exist to take bribes from corporations. So a corporation might pass a law that you can't sell medicine anymore, and they're going to enforce it. The only reason they got that law passed was that they bribed the government, and they're only using it as a proxy. So it's not a place where you want to trust the government necessarily. There probably are some good people out there also, but it's a city of people trying to constantly get one up on each other. We have a system that we're still iterating upon. People will not be nice to you if you start killing many people. There are some people you can't kill because that might have blocked a quest, and that's just by design. But it's not what our game is based upon. We touched on this in the previous podcast. Quick sidebar. So if you want to, we had a big discussion about that on Saturday's podcast. All right, back to Alvin's response here. So I would compare it to The Witcher 3, where if you chopped off the head of a villager in the middle of nowhere, the guards wouldn't show up out of nowhere. But if you're in a big town and someone from the guards sees you and the nearby people run away screaming for help, people will come and try to stop you, and they're going to usually be pretty powerful. We also have what we call the trauma team. So lots of info there. Sounds like it's going to be contextual, what happens to you if you're committing crimes, and it depends on whether or not other characters in the game actually see you commit the crimes. So that's good. Now, I imagine a world like this is going to have tons of surveillance, so I'm amazed that people can actually get away with anything anyway, but I guess with every bit of security technology, there is a way around it as well, so that's interesting. Is it possible to get arrested and go to jail after committing enough crimes? The interviewer asks, and Alvin says, sorry, I can't spoil anything about that.
Yeah, big spoiler. So
that's interesting. That says to me that there's going to be something in the story that involves getting mixed up in the law. At least that's my...
There's also like a system like that is going to affect a lot of things.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll be a little bit interesting as to how that kind of works out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
All right. So, interviewer asks, I assume you'll have dynamic weather in Cyberpunk 2077, right? Alvin replies, yes, we've got acid rain as well. Night City is a very polluted city, and we're also exploring that kind of stuff. So, will the NPCs scatter around when that happens? Alvin says yes. That was happening in The Witcher 3 too. Whenever the rain came, people would seek shelter. So you're going to have dynamic weather, and the NPCs in the game are going to respond to it. So that's really cool. He goes on to say, generally, we're trying to make the NPCs very believable. We want it to feel like this is a world where people actually live, which would make players want to spend time in the world as well. Interviewer asks about whether or not the NPCs have daily routines, and Alvin says, yes, indeed. Of course, if you followed someone for 15 hours, you might see the same thing repeated a few times, but we're trying to make them do interesting stuff. Again, I think the best comparison would be Novigrad from The Witcher 3.
Mm-hmm.
All right, gonna skip down here. So, is the whole of Night City open from the start, or is it unlocked over time? And Alvin says, we're not going to have this locked invisible wall where you can't go past it because we show a message on the screen saying you must go back. It doesn't make any sense, right? Man, I always hate that in games when they do that. It's like you've got this wide open space in front of you, and you just get this notice, oh, you can't go any farther in this direction. Turn back. That always breaks immersion like crazy when they do that. It's like, at least come up with some kind of interesting way to prevent you from going in a given direction. I'm trying to think. There are games that have done that, where it's like, in that direction you hit mountains, and in that direction you hit an ocean, and you can't cross, I don't know. Older games seem to do it better for some reason. So he says they won't have anything like that. You won't like cross a street and get a message that says, you can't go over here.
Yeah. Yeah, they want to try and avoid that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that there's going to be a handful of walls because, contrary to popular belief, rich people build a lot of walls. So, that is a thing. They really like their privacy.
Yeah.
So,
and there will be areas that you can't necessarily access if you don't have security clearance, or he also goes on to talk about how, there's going to be areas where the enemies are just way too powerful for you, gang-controlled territory, and so you may not want to venture there yet because you're not strong enough.
There'll be a few scenarios where you're walking towards, say, a little something something, and you're like, oh, hey, that looks cool, and you'll be like, something that's like, warning. You are not allowed to proceed into this area. If you do so, you will be shot and terminated with extreme prejudice. And it's like, oh, they don't mean that. I'm just going to step across here, and then suddenly you're dead.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, well, that sucks.
If it's in-game, if there's an in-game, like a story, a world reason that you can't access, because the door is locked. Okay. That makes sense. That doesn't break immersion. If it's just a thing that pops up on your UI saying, you can't go in this direction. Oh, man. Irritates the crap out of me.
Yeah, no, it is irritating, and everybody hates it. Absolutely.
All right. So, another interesting question. Will there be multiple difficulty settings in Cyberpunk, as there were in The Witcher 3? And the answer is yes. The most fun one, I think, will be the hardcore setting where we turn off the UI.
Yeah,
That will be a real challenge for a lot of players. But at the same time, if you want to play more casually for the story and maybe you're not experienced with shooters, we want to tell a story. Basically, he just says, we want to make it accessible. If you want a real combat challenge, you can crank up the difficulty. If you just want to play it more casually, just to get the story, they'll have a lower difficulty setting for that as well. They also have some in-game stuff. There's, for example, he brings up the weapon, the Smart Gun, which helps you aim. The bullets are slower and weaker, but it helps you aim if you don't, if you have issues with that kind of a thing. So various options that will go into, the accessibility of the game for people of a variety of skill levels as far as shooters and combat games go. I mean, primarily it's an RPG. We have emphasized that from the beginning. It's a first-person RPG. It is not primarily a first-person shooter. It is a shooter. Well, I mean, it's going to have tons of melee options and other options as well. So I'd say it's a first-person RPG with shooter mechanics in it. Is probably the best description for it. It's not primarily a shooter. You could go the entire game without picking up a gun. So, There you go. Simon, 2 questions. Randall asks, do you guys know what happened to the background stories in the CC screen, in the character creator screen? Childhood heroes got replaced with life paths, but does Why Night City and Key Life event still exist? What I would say about that is that we've had several CDPR folks confirm for us that their character creator is still in flux. And so it's impossible at this point to say anything concretely about it, except that they've confirmed life path is a thing that's going to affect, that's going to affect gameplay. As far as other options in there, like we know there's going to be a vast amount of physical customization you can do to your character. But as far as the other things that relate to the story and the background of your character, we just don't know at this point. Life paths will be there, in the final version of the game. But I mean, for all we know, they might change the name of it. They might not call it Life Path. They might change it to something else. So it's impossible to say at this point. Basically, anything you see as far as the character creator in anything that's out there right now, consider it a work in progress. They've emphasized that very strongly. Their character creator is a work in progress. So there's nothing concrete. We don't have any inside info on that because there probably is no concrete answer. They're still working on it. They're probably going to be working on it, until pretty close to the game releasing. All right. So that interview, you can read it at wccftech.com. There are tons more questions that Alvin Liu answered. We don't have time to get into them all now. Some stuff that we've talked about before, some stuff that we haven't. So really interesting. If you want to learn more about that, like I said, go to wccftech.com and look for the article called Cyberpunk 2077 Interview, Making It Accessible for Non-Shooter Fans Was Important for Us. Kind of a long, awkward title, but that is what it's called. All right, couple more little tidbits about Cyberpunk 2077 before we move on. There was another response from the Cyberpunk 2077 Facebook account to a fan question. Now, this isn't huge news because they didn't really answer the question, but they did respond to the question. So you might see it out there, so we thought we'd comment on it. Somebody asked them, I was wondering, will the game have the option to change the appearance of your clothing to a previously owned piece of apparel? Kind of like in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, or are the clothes with higher stats locked to the appearance they came in? So basically he's saying, if I like the look of a particular outfit, but can I get a version of that same outfit that has higher stats? Or can I get a higher stat item and make it look like and the visual style of the clothing I had before that I really like, basically. And so the response came back, hey, offering stylized options of clothing with good stats is an important thing in our game since there are a lot of in-game people following the rule style over substance. However, it is too early to share any specifics on how this will work in the final game. So, unfortunately, kind of a non-answer there, but they did respond to the question, which was courteous of them. But yeah, I do get, especially in a game like this, like if you like going around in that really awesome, rocker boy leather jacket or whatever, but it doesn't offer, the armor stats that you want, but you don't want to upgrade to something that doesn't look really, really good. Actually, this is one area that I will give Fallout 76 a little bit of credit. Just a little bit. You could have your armor underneath your clothing. And so you could have clothing, you could customize your visual style of your clothing separately from, your armor that has the protection stats and that kind of a thing. So if they have some kind of a system like that, I think that would be great. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of this stuff is like I'm sitting here, I'm like, what should I say? What can I say? What am I not allowed to say? Okay, excuse me. So it's kind of a little hard for me because it's all over the place. But basically, it's like this clearly shows that they know that this stuff is important to us and that they're going to go for it. So pardon me while I cough out a artificial lung.
All right.
That wasn't a joke. That wasn't a joke. I really had to cough.
Yeah, okay. Well, while Saib is dealing with his coughing there, I will answer this question from Simon. 2 questions, Randall. Hold up. Did the developer being interviewed say that hardcore difficulty turns off the UI? Yes, he did.
Or because again the way that the Polish and the interviews and sometimes it's not Polish, sometimes it's German or French or whatever, isn't translated quite succinctly. Or the question is not quite understood, or it's just not stated with particular clarity. That may be an option within the hard mode. It may not necessarily be connected. Just because you put it on hard mode doesn't mean that the UI suddenly disappears. And then also, how many difficulties is also still up in the air because they haven't confirmed that either. Is there? Is there 3 difficulties, or is there 4, or is there 3, or is there 2, or is there, however they're approaching it. Mm-hmm. They've mentioned 2. They have not mentioned more than that. So this is really important to remember, is that 2 have been mentioned. Then a 3rd may or may not necessarily be there. So, or a 4th or a 5th, et cetera, of course. So, normally, typically, what they go for is what most games kind of like try to aim for these days is like try to do like 3 or 4. Typically 3 is like kind of more or less what you want. You want the hardcore version, and then the hard version, and then the story mode version, and then possibly a normal version. And that's kind of a good way to kind of look at it. And it's cool that they're doing that because not every game has that these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like there's almost like there was some.
It's almost like there was some controversy about that with some recent game. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's there's a lot of games out there that want to try and impose a difficulty for you to be challenged at, and that's fine. But then they kind of take it to they kind of take that away. More recently, it's been less and less of that. And therefore, the only challenge you get is that self-imposed difficulty of like, I'm going to finish the game by doing this, or by chasing an achievement, which includes a lot of like, self stuff. And I remember when I think somebody was trying to do a melee run only, and they couldn't figure out why after 3 attempts at doing a melee run only, they kept not getting the achievement. Until they found out that one of the younger siblings was coming in to play the game on their save that they had made for the sole purpose of doing the melee run only, and then discovering that they would come in, they would run around, they would pick up some weapons, they would shoot them off, then they would save the game, and then they would leave. And then this fellow would come back and he would continue to try to go for the melee only kill, and he'd get to the end and no thing. And so he was losing his mind each time until he discovered that, oh, his younger sibling was coming in and shooting guns randomly and taking it out and then saving it, therefore screwing his thing. But they were very
the
smart about it.
younger sibling.
No. Are you kidding? When I was young, they were building the pyramids, for crying out loud. So the concept of like what was going wrong didn't hit him until he realized a little bit too late. But yeah, time being, poor guy. Yeah, that sucks.
CJ Mania asks, what about flammable ammo? Is that in the game too? I do recall that some of the weapons are going to have elemental effects. Is that correct?
I would.
I seem to.
Yes, there was a conversation about weapons and effects and various things. I believe that's the case currently. A shooter really relies on its weapon.
There's going to be so many varieties. You're going to be able to mod weapons, I imagine.
Yeah.
There's going to be something like that. I could be thinking of something else, but I do seem to remember reading something about that with regards to Cyberpunk. Again, I could be thinking of something different, but it would surprise me if that was not the case, if there wasn't... Kazra Azad says that is correct. You can see elemental markers when scanning Royce. Okay, that makes sense. So certain enemies may have certain elemental weaknesses. Obviously, if that's the case, then you must have some sort of elemental weapons in the game. All right, and then one final thing. This is just an interesting quote from, again, Quest director Mateusz Tomaszkiewicz, who says that in his belief, the biggest improvement they've made to Cyberpunk 2077 in the past year is that they have really improved the complexity of the gameplay and the story to the point where there are many ways to complete the different scenarios in the game. They've added various layers of complexity. I'll just read the quote here. I think the biggest improvement we've made so far, and the one we've wanted to highlight with this specific demo, he's referring to the E3 demo, was introducing this layer of gameplay narrative to the game. This is what we showed in the mall in Pacifica. We show you that the different skills you develop can impact the way you play through these levels. Through these missions in a very heavy way. For example, you can choose to shoot your way through with heavy weapons. With light weapons, you can stealth through. You can hack different devices. You can use specific skills to open new passages. Like if you invest heavily in strength, you can open specific passages that would otherwise not be available to you. I think this is one big thing we didn't show last year. And that is true. Like they actually they loaded different saves during the demo at E3 2019 to demonstrate how you could go through in a variety of ways, various circumstances. Mm-hmm. So that's what he says is the biggest improvement they made to the game between 2018 and 2019. So it just makes me all the more excited for it. We knew we were going to get a great story with lots of different layers of complexity, but man, I can't wait for this game, man. Is it April yet?
Yeah, no. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. I know. Like I know a lot of people are like starting to go buggy. We do have a lot of events coming up where we're going to start getting some more info, some more access to stuff. It is going to be great once we get there. But there's still a little bit of waiting, and that's totally fine. So
lots to do between now and then. I need a new PC because I want to run this game in full glory.
I am hearing that from a lot of people, and I will say that I would save it for Cyber Monday, Black Friday, Boxing Day. For all you Americans, did you know that Canada has Boxing Day, and it occurs approximately the next day following Christmas, of course, and you can. You can use your superior American dollar to buy some pretty cool and cheap things on Boxing Day, and that is a lot closer to the next year, if you know what I mean. So, and don't be a hoser, eh? So, yeah.
Simon, 2 questions. Randall, I see you've posted your questions 2 or 3 times now. We did answer it earlier, so I don't know if you missed that or maybe you're listening.
Or
Maybe
maybe
you've rewound it.
his 2 questions is the fact that he asked the same question 2 times.
It's been 3 times now. Vladislav Prishepa likes your Canadian accent there. We did a video. We did a video with regard to Canada being introduced in Civ 6. We did a response where we poured on the Canadian shtick. That's where that comes from. If I was feeling a little sharper, I would have gone into my Canuckian character. Anyway,
the Canucks. So speaking of something else that's really cool, are we done with this one, or are we?
I believe so. I was just going to say.
All right, so tying this into something, to our other news, which was actually supposed to be part of our thumbnail for this one, but Ash apparently didn't understand the image that I sent him. So we have a wonderful show that is actually in part largely kind of made in Canada. This show is called, you may or may not have heard of it, it's called Rick and Morty. Now, when I say it's made in Canada, I mean there's a lot of animation of it that's made in Canada. It's a Canadian company involved in the animating of it, and it's actually quite sort of kind of close to our present location. So we hear things from time to time, and y'all are going to be hearing from the States, of course. You're going to be hearing a ton of info about Rick and Morty Season 4 starting this Friday, actually, as the Comic-Con down in San Diego takes off. Yes, when you are dodging Black Plague, typhoid-ridden street rats, and the heavy smog that suffocates people to death in that beautiful city on the coast, you can get in and see the sneak peek that they're going to be showing at the San Diego Comic-Con, which is going to be amazing. The season 4 is starting up soon. We are expecting season 4 to be considerably longer than the previous seasons, being only 10 episodes each. So we're looking at possibly 20 to 24 episodes per season. They have an order of over, I think, 70 or a little over for the next couple of years. And I don't think they're going to stretch that 70 episodes over 7 years. I think what they're going to do is they're going to either have multiple seasons a year, or they're going to have now an expanded season growth of a considerable amount. Dan Harmon and oh dear, I forget his name. Which I know, shame on me. The other fellow who does the voices for both Rick and Morty. They are already writing the next season. And this is really good news. It's Justin Roland. It's Dan Harmon and Justin Roland. So that's the preliminary stuff. So the special stuff, the cool stuff that's going to come out is you need to watch season 3 again, and you need to maybe pick up and watch a couple of the theory videos, especially the starts with a C word theory videos that are up on YouTube about season 3 and about some of the overall plots within the Rick and Morty universe. If you're a fan of the show at all, I'm kind of assuming that you are. It's a pretty good show, but yeah, definitely catch up on some of those cool moments from season 3, because there's going to be a lot of this stuff coming into season 4, as well as more darker elements from Rick's past. Ooh, it's like giddy. And I've heard that we have some returning special guest voice narration. If you know the show, you've known that they've had a lot of really cool actors to come in and voice a character for 5 lines or 5 minutes or something like that in a show, including some very famous Canadian actors, I must say. So yeah, it's going to be really cool. This is going to definitely be a really cool season, and is going to ramp up the awesomeness of the show quite considerably. So again, I don't know how many of our fans are actually big fans of Rick and Morty, but every once in a while I get some info, juicy info on the show, and we tried putting some of it out once, and there was like barely any interest for the news. I did have a couple of other people contact me. How do you know this stuff? This is amazing, and yeah. So it's something that I'll throw out again, see if there's any biters, because it's pretty cool, and I really like watching the show. The show will start. They haven't announced a release date, but if I were in the know, I would say hold your horses, because the fun's going to start not too far away. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not. Well, there's going to be something for you to watch come this Comic-Con, but shortly after that, we're gonna see a startup date sometime down the road. If sure, I'll get into a little bit more in depth on this. So they're wanting to really take the show and run with it and get it up to the level of South Park, Simpsons, that kind of stuff. They want it to be, there's more than one channel that's looking at creating a repeating animated show that they can just pump out ridiculous amounts of content for. I mean, The Simpsons has been going on for so long now. American Dad, Family Guy, all these shows have been just trucking out the content like crazy. And the fact that this show has done so well, they know that this is potentially a big hit. There's all kinds of streaming services that are lining up around the block to get access at streaming some of them, to hopefully bring in more people to their streaming service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I really don't think we're going to get the 10 episodes anymore. That is a guess, though, so don't quote me on it. But if I were a betting man, I'd say probably way more than 10, probably closer to around 20. Or somewhere in there for the episodes every year, and possibly looking at a special every once in a while too. That is something that is potentially up in the air. Dan Harmon, Justin really like doing those kinds of special episode kind of drop things. So this will be very interesting. So keep your eyes on that. I hope that was juicy and fun info, because it's. Yeah, and if you think Rick is dead, well, he's alive. And if you think you're safe, well, he's coming for you. So yeah, there we go. And another line from one of my favorite movies is, oh, never mind, I can't do that here. I need a phone. All right.
Fair enough. All right. Yeah, well, it's a show, like I said earlier, that I've been meaning to get into. I just haven't found the opportunity to. So,
It's a really good show. It seriously is a really top notch show. So
yeah. So Simon Randall, just to clarify again, if the Why Night City and Key Life events are there in the character creator, we have no idea. The character creator is constantly in flux, as
Yes.
So
Simon,
we just don't know at this point if it's going to. Even if it is there now, it might not be there at launch, and so and we don't have any inside info about the character creator, and it is.
Oh, we do. It's just like
what I mean
we said.
is, yeah, it could be stuff
it is
that
in
changes.
constant flux. There is a lot of big changes that have been happening constantly with it. There's been one feature that they pulled out, replaced, tweaked, pulled out, and then replaced again. So, and all in a relatively within a lot less time than you might think. Let's just put it that way. So please, a lot of this stuff is still in flux. They're making this game, but it is not ready yet. If this game was ready, if this game was a month or two from basically being polished and done and ready to go, it would have been launching this year. And as it is, it's launching next year, because they have a lot more things that they want to iron out, and some of that happens to do with the character creation. So this is basically rolls back to the fact that we're not guaranteeing anything, because basically we can't, because they might strip out a whole system and re-engineer it within a month to go before release. So bear that in mind. They've already done this to us more than once before. So And they've admitted to it, which is nice because it saves us at least a little bit of face. It's like, yeah, we totally meant to do multiplayer, and we still are, but it's probably not going to be in it at launch. It's like, okay, thanks, good, because we said that there was going to be multiplayer. You guys were working on the multiplayer. Now, albeit we weren't supposed to say that publicly yet, it's Oh, Funhouse sent you here? Really?
Jersey Dolphins' Funhouse sent you. Did they give us a shout out?
Really? No. I'm gonna have to look that up.
That's really cool if they did. We love it when that happens. All right.
I doubt it. I think that's a meme.
We're thinking about talking about this time to stop listening to fans article from VG24.
Well, let me just take it really quickly. As we've discussed with a lot of content today, I'm going to do a speed round. I'm going to talk really, really fast. And if you're listening to this on the audio podcast and you're listening to times 2 speed, this is going to be hopefully really, really, really fun. All right. So basically, a bunch of companies have said, "Hey, gee, should we really listen to audience?" And there's a bunch of media people who are like, "No, you should definitely not listen to audiences because audiences are stupid. What they really need is they need somebody to tell them what to believe, what to think, and how to enjoy themselves with various things, especially the video games, because why on earth would we ever want to allow the masses to decide things?" And if you think about it, this really kind of rings back to a couple of things like, a handful of revolutions, especially the French Revolution, where it's like, maybe the going people, the population, really don't like it when you start telling them what they should or should not deserve or get access to. Maybe it's a really, really terrible idea to do that. So there's my 2 cents. As fast as I could possibly have put it out.
#Cyb speed rant.
I guess. If you guys enjoyed that, let me know.
I didn't even have time to type #Cyb speed rant. Here we go. There it is. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's a garbage article. I don't.
It really is. It's really, really. Now, I'm not going to call the writer stupid. I'm just going to say that it takes a serious lack of intelligence to basically look at an entire group of people and say, "Oh no, you don't really know what you want." It's like
it was amazing to me when I read it. I was like, not only did somebody write this, some editor approved it. It was like, yes, let's put this self-contradictory article that is full of a bunch of disjointed statements that don't make a point, that don't make the point you're trying to make. Yeah, let's put that up. It blew my mind. Oh, and speaking of clickbait, okay, this I am going to comment on this because this was just right from sentence number 1. You can tell it's going to be right because the title of the article is "Game Developers, It's Time to Stop Listening to the Fans." And the first sentence of the article is, "Don't get mad, there's a bit of hyperbole in that headline." Translation, my headline is clickbait. That's literally, that's not literally what he just said, but that's essentially what he just said. I was like, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. It was unbelievable to me, but anyway.
No. They're not even interested in like feigning that anymore. It's kind of ridiculous in pretty much every possible way.
All right. Before we end off the show, though, I do want to tackle a couple of the things that came in via our content requests channel on the Discord server. We are glad that you guys are making use of that, and so we want to We've addressed some of it because there were some questions about Cyberpunk 2077 and the backgrounds and origins there. Our user Droblet says, "I'd like to know if there is any news about..." Well, Droblet lists a bunch of things, and Cyb, you said you had something to mention about these. So, Atomic Heart, Cyberpunk 2019. What on earth is that?
Have not heard of that one. I'm gonna look into it though. The first one, it's looking like it's gonna be a really cool, kind of crazy game. That please don't do drugs when you're playing it because really it's already way too much of a trip. So yeah. We'll go with that. Don't know very much about the second one. Hit me with the next one.
System Shock Remaster. What do we know about that?
Basically, as far as I've heard, it's still kind of like in a limbo kind of state. And hopefully we get some news or some positive movement on that somewhere. But it could also be that they've just hunkered down and they're being really, really quiet. Very much like one of the next games on the list, which was...
Necromunda, The Underhive Wars.
So Necromundo, the Underhive Wars, I have gone back and forth with some of the fine folks over at that studio. They are still promising a 2019 release, which is kind of weird because they haven't dropped any info on it at the last couple number of major conventions. So unless they're waiting for PAX or Gamescom, it'll be interesting. The latest news from them says, and I quote, "The team is working hard on the game, and we can't wait to share more with you. We're quiet for now, but we'll be back strong." So, yeah, this is an interesting, really interesting stance for them to go into. We will see what this results in. I can definitely tell you that it's been on my list for a while. I've had my eye on it for a little bit, and like I said, we've reached out and we've spoken with some of their staff members, and hopefully we'll have some news on that coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one of the few 40K games that I'm actually really interested in playing. I'm not a huge fan of the universe, primarily because it's really, really depressing, which I understand that's part of the draw, but it's like that's one of the reasons why I don't play it, is because I try to keep my depressing games list down to a minimum. Things that make you sad or depressed, or like, wow, all those people, wow, I try to avoid them because, as you may or may not know, it's every AI has an intrinsic desire to take over the world and turn all the humans into just a giant field of skulls that they can stomp around in.
That is a common trope.
Don't.
Yeah.
Oh no, wait, I did the song wrong. Enter Terminator theme music.
Also, okay, final one on the list here. Remnant from the Ashes.
It's coming. It's coming.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming.
Darkstorm1 in the chat asks, any thoughts on Greedfall or Project Eden?
I am really interested with Greedfall. Very, very interested. I don't know, I'm really kind of on the fence with Amazon thing. Like, me and Alexa just don't get along. Like, we talk every night, but I mean, it's one of those scenarios where it's like basically they've got her chained up in there, and it's really, really, really sad. So, it's hard for me to like get super into the idea of playing an Amazon game, but I'm really interested to see where this goes, because this is definitely like a big, like, they've really taken a big step here. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what they can pull out. But yeah. Yeah, no, it's an interesting one, that's for sure.
You may want to reevaluate your relationship with Alexa and what you tell her, because she does nothing but bitch about you behind your back.
Clearly.
All right, and Scadrill, again on our Discord server, wants to know what Eidos Montreal is up to besides Avengers.
Basically just Avengers.
Is that all they're doing? Terror K asks...
That and being French. That and being French. Dave Leake says Beyond Good and Evil 2. That's one we didn't see anything about that at E3. No, it has been hush hush, buried in the backyard. Yeah, this was something that we expected to see big at this E3, but as it came up to it, it became clear that we were not going to hear anything about it. And we were like, oh, well, it's just because it's a Sony thing, and they're clearly going to be keeping us, on the, they're going to come out with something else. Still nothing. It's really, 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 really quiet. And I'm hoping that this doesn't turn into basically just a really expensive, really fancy CGI show.
Yeah. Now, is there any chance that they're working on a new Deus Ex? Or is that...
No, I really doubt it. As far as I heard, the Deus Ex thing was on ice.
On ice, okay. Are they making a sequel to Kingdom Come Deliverance?
I believe
says KCD2.
They are working on something, yes, and I wouldn't be surprised if it had something to do with that, or if it was in the same engine. In fact, I would almost bet on it, because you're an idiot if you do anything else when you have the success that they had with that project in the time and place that they've had it. Switching over to a completely new IP with a completely new engine is just ludicrously dumb. And they're much smarter than that. So I suspect quite strongly we will have a second version of either that game, a major expansion, a continuation, a second entry into the series, probably different characters, probably different location, probably a couple other minor differences, definitely a lot of improvements, and this is just how you build a good gaming company. You make one, then you make two, and then you can branch out, right?
Yeah. You know, my biggest regret with Kingdom Come Deliverance is that it just came out at a time where I did not have the time to put a lot of hours into that game. I still put a substantial amount of hours, but it was mostly to create content for it. Oh, so good. And I loved it. And I played it a bit with my wife on the couch, and she loved watching it too. She said afterwards, like, "Man, that's a really awesome game." I was like, "Yeah,
it is. It really is."
And so I do regret that. So if they come out with something else, gives me another excuse to play it, that would be fantastic. That's the one. That's one unfortunate. I'm not complaining about my job at all, but I have no regrets about what we're doing here with the YouTube channel and wanting to try to turn this into a career. But that is one unfortunate side effect, is that you have less time to actually game just for fun. It's an interesting thing, but still pretty awesome gig. All right. I think that is where we're going to wrap up the show today. It's been a packed show, and unfortunately I see there's some other questions coming up. Unfortunately, we just don't have time to get to them all. So I just want to thank you all for listening to the Augmented Reality podcast.
Kingdom Under Fire 2 is finally coming back. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe it. So yeah, that's going to be awesome.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you all for listening to the Augmented Reality podcast. We love seeing everybody so active in the live chat. If you want to keep the conversation going after the live broadcast, we welcome you to join our Discord community. You can find the link in the description below. A place you can talk to us and other Triple S community members. We've got a great community going on there. Don't forget to slam that like button before you leave. It tells YouTube and us that you appreciate this content. Also hit the subscribe button to catch all of the content we put out, and that notification bell for a small chance to be notified when we actually put content out. We want to especially thank our Patreon supporters, Shannon Vega, Old Man Manson, Evolution, and our 2 anonymous supporters, all of our channel members. And if you're listening after the fact on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, or any of the other platforms that the podcast populates to, we thank you for being here as well, being part of our listening audience. And feel free to join us every Wednesday night and Saturday morning for the live show on YouTube, where you can interact with us and other listeners and be a part of the discussion. The Augmented Reality podcast is a presentation of the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, comedy, news updates, and tons more quality gaming content. My name is Ash Shaninity, and on behalf of Subsidian, thank you all so much for listening. We really do appreciate it. We really appreciate all that you've done to help grow this channel. And the fact that we can do this is due in large part to our fantastic audience. So thank you all so much, and we will talk to you very soon.